Good evening. I'm John Wensky, Chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee, and welcome to our meeting for Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Selco's Channel 29 and 329 and streamed live on Shrewsbury Media Connections website. Thank you to SMC Executive Director Mark Serra and Liz Poplowski for their assistance with this broadcast. Tonight's meeting will be rebroadcast between now and our next scheduled meeting next week on Wednesday, November 17th. The first item on our agenda is public participation. Tonight, no one has expressed interest in participating. However, for future meetings, if anybody wishes to participate in public participation, they should contact the chairperson prior to the beginning of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is chairpersons and members' reports. Colleagues, anything to report this week? No. Okay, moving on. Next item on our agenda is superintendent's report. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much. I'd like to let the community know that live drama returns to Shrewsbury High School this weekend. There is going to be a performance of The Scarlet Letter that will take place in the Shrewsbury High School Auditorium on Friday evening, November 12th, and Saturday evening, November 13th at 7 p.m. Tickets are available at the door only. They're $15 for adults and $10 for students and senior citizens. Mr. Lopomardo promises it's going to be an outstanding performance, and we're looking forward to seeing the result of those students' hard work. We know it'll be a high-quality production for sure. I also wanted to mention the great success that our athletics program has had this past fall, and that continues. I first want to mention that I had the opportunity to get to a couple of our unified basketball games, including today's final game. This year, that program has become so popular and has become so successful that we actually fielded two teams that each played schedules against other high school teams. And as a final game today, they honored the seniors in the program, and they played, they had named the teams the blue team and the gold team, and they played a game against each other. Had an outstanding crowd there today, and a lot of enthusiasm, and just really pleased the way that program has continued to evolve in a positive way. In terms of interscholastic athletics, Oak Middle School, we had successful seasons, the first ever season for football at Oak Middle School. That was an addition that was made this year that was very successful. The cross-country team, as usual, also had a very successful season, as did the field hockey team. And then at Shrewsbury High School, virtually almost every team made postseason play and certainly acquitted themselves well. So congratulations to all of our high school athletes, and want to particularly wish good luck to the teams that are still in competition. The cheerleading team will be participating in the Central Mass West Regionals on Sunday. On Saturday morning and throughout the day, the boys cross-country and girls cross-country teams are going to be competing in the state qualifier meets. The boys cross-country team won the Midwatch League Championship, and for the first time in its history won the district championship, and are moving on to state qualifiers. And want to also congratulate the field hockey team, in which I have a particular rooting interest. They just won last night in the round of 16, and they've moved on to the Elite 8. They're one of the top 8 teams in the state in Division I, and they play their next round against Andover High School, at Andover High School on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. So it's been an outstanding, and certainly coming out of, as we continue to manage through the pandemic, these programs, whether it's drama or athletics, are really key to making sure our students have the kinds of opportunities and to interact and get all the benefits that come with those kind of co-curricular activities. So we're very pleased with the success this past fall. And that is Superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is a time schedule appointment for student recognition at a Superintendent's Awards. To give my colleagues some background, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents requests that each superintendent on its behalf recognize outstanding members of the senior class in each district's high school. Based on the size of the graduating class, Dr. Sawyer is allowed to present the award to 2 students this year. Dr. Sawyer has selected Penelope Crosby and Dixie Hahn as this year's recipients due to their outstanding academic performance. Additionally, the New England School Development Council gives superintendents in affiliated districts the opportunity to present the National School Development Council Award for academic growth and student leadership and learning to deserving high school seniors. Again, due to the size of this district, Dr. Sawyer is allowed to present the awards to 2 students based upon the recommendations of Assistant Principal at SHS, P.J. O'Connell, who was the grade administrator for the class of 2022, along with Todd Bazidlo, the principal of SHS. Omer Alptekan and Madeleine Duke have been selected as this year's recipients of that award. Dr. Sawyer will provide highlights of each student's achievements. So with that, Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much. And if those 4 students could come forward and have a seat at the table. This is a highlight each year to be able to recognize 4 outstanding students in the senior class at Shrewsbury High School. And what I will do is give a brief biographical sketch of each and their accomplishments. And after I give that, the student will make some brief remarks. Then after all 4 have had a chance to be introduced and to speak, be happy to have any comments from the school committee at that time. So I'll go in the order. And this is alphabetical with the first award, which is, again, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Award for Academic Excellence. These 2 students are the 2 top-ranked students in the senior class at this time. And we'll start with Penelope Crosby. These are biographical sketches that were written by their school counselors, also known often as guidance counselors. And they know them well from their work through the high school years. So I'm going to read the description, and then we'll have them make some comments. So for Penelope, self-motivated, compassionate, and driven. Penelope Crosby is a student who has taken a demanding course load that includes many honors courses and 9 advanced placement courses. She's earned highest honor status on the Shrewsbury High School honor roll every marking period during her high school career. Penelope's success extends beyond the classroom. She's a qualifying black belt in karate and a talented musician who was first chair trumpet in the 9th grade concert band and 10th grade wind ensemble. She's currently first trumpet in the 12th grade wind ensemble. Penelope is intellectually curious, always open to learning new things. She has an interest in languages. She's taught herself the Korean alphabet and Japanese kana so that she can read those languages phonetically. Other accomplishments include having a poem published in the From the Heart anthology in the 10th grade. She's been a member of the Chinese Honor Society since the 11th grade and also received the Dartmouth Book Award in 11th grade. Penelope's given back to the community through several service activities. Most notably, she's a volunteer tutor, and she's also helped to donate over 640 books to an elementary school in Worcester that had no library. She went above and beyond by suggesting titles, visited book sales, kept track of which books in the series were needed, categorized and sorted books by grade level, screened them for suitability, and entered the titles in a database so that teachers could search for the books that they needed. Not only is Penelope a model student, but she's also an exemplary model of the type of people we have at Shrewsbury High School who live by the school's core values on a daily basis. So congratulations, and we'll turn it over to Penelope for some remarks.
Okay, so firstly, I would like to thank the school committee and Dr. Sawyer for selecting me to receive this award and for all their hard work. And then I would like to thank my teachers, especially Mrs. Gardner and Ms. Ye, for their enthusiasm and passion for teaching, which has in turn contributed to my own passion and enthusiasm for learning. And finally, I would like to thank my family for their continued support.
Thank you, Penelope. Our next award winner is Dixie Hahn. Her counselor writes that Dixie has been a wonderful student throughout her 4 years at Shrewsbury High School. Teachers have constantly praised her intellect as being in the top 1% that they've noted in their teaching careers. Very few students have the ability to fully comprehend all topics, no matter the mode of instruction. Dixie is one of them. In addition, Dixie is able to think critically and apply her content knowledge to any outside problem or novel question. Outside the classroom, Dixie's participated on the Mentor Volunteer Program Advisory Board. She's a 4-year member of the varsity golf team, serving as captain in her senior year. She's first chair of the Wind Ensemble and Symphony Orchestra, president of the French National Honor Society, a member of the National Honor Society, Math National Honor Society, and Tri-M Music National Honor Society. And despite all of this, she still found time to volunteer at the Shrewsbury Public Library, as well as the Green Hill Golf Course Summer Camp. And I'll turn it over to Dixie.
I'm very honored to receive this award, so thank you to Dr. Sawyer and to the school committee. I'd also like to thank my family for their continued support over the years. I'd also like to thank all of the teachers and staff at the high school for their help and hard work. Special thanks to Mr. Collins, my calculus teacher, and Mr. Brown, my history teacher, for making last year really enjoyable despite all the challenges we faced. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dixie. Moving on at this point to the award from the National School Development Council, which again is known as the Award for Academic Growth and Student Leadership and Learning, which really places a lot of emphasis on a variety of ways that they're serving and making the school community better. And I appreciated the recommendations from Mr. Bazidlo and Mr. O'Connell. Mr. O'Connell's here this evening. Mr. Bazidlo unfortunately couldn't be with us because he had a separate family commitment. First recipient of this award is Omer Alptekan. Omer is listed here by his counselor as a leader in his school community. He was a student representative on the SHS Mascot Study Group and is currently a student representative on the District School Wellness Advisory Committee. Omer has participated in the robotics team, the crew team. During his time on the robotics team, he volunteered to help coach younger students during robotics competitions. He was also able to compete in the first Robotics New England District Granite State competition. During his time on the crew team, his boat qualified for the Head of the Charles competition. He's also participated in the annual Science and Engineering Fair. He went on to compete in the regional finals for his science project that year. The topic of his project was developing a faster shorthand, which I could benefit from at times as well. Omer is a strong communicator as well. He has always built strong connections with many adults and peers in the school building. He exudes maturity and professionalism and is one of the most hardworking and dedicated students. His positive energy is contagious, and he genuinely cares for the well-being of people around him. Omer is a change agent who will thrive both in college and in his future as an adult. And his counselor writes that they're honored to have worked with such a remarkable young man and look forward to reading about his accomplishments and journey one day in the future. Turn it over to Omer.
Thank you to the SHS administration, the school committee, and Dr. Sawyer for this award. I'd like to thank, first off, my parents for being there for me, in my highs and my lows, and they've really supported me, throughout, my difficulties that I face in life. I'd also like to thank Mr. O'Connell and Walter Hildebrand for being two people in the school that have supported me, through difficult times, and I'm in great debt to them. And I'd lastly like to thank Coach Noble, who until recently was the head coach of the SHS Boys Crew program, and he's exposed me to the sport of rowing and has helped me fall in love with that sport, and that sport has changed my life. So thank you to Coach Noble. Thank you to the school committee, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Omer. And the other recipient of this award is Madeleine Duke. Madeleine's counselor writes that Madeleine puts her heart and soul into everything she does. She is currently working on her capstone project, which is focusing on the signs of happiness. She's passionate about community health and well-being. She completed an online course called The Science of Well-Being through Yale University, in addition to doing her own research. In addition, Madeleine is a member of the National Honor Society, Latin National Honor Society, a mentor volunteer, captain of the varsity basketball team, and the list goes on. She is socially responsible and will make a positive impact in the world. She's been volunteering weekly as a mentor for Boston Children's Hospital, as well as for Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. She is a member of the Shrewsbury High School Swag Club, which focuses on the well-being of her peers, as well as the high school staff. Madeleine.
I'd first like to thank Dr. Sawyer, Mr. Bazidlo, Mr. O'Connell, and the school committee for presenting me with this award today. I'm honored. I'm very fortunate to have been educated through the Shrewsbury public school system, as it is incredible. Our teachers not only push us to be the best versions of ourselves, but they connect with us at a personal level, which makes all the difference. I would like to thank my fourth grade teacher, Ms. Travers, for pushing me to become involved in student council at such a young age, as well as my TV teacher, Ms. Herbert, who has helped me channel my creativity, as well as learn that school can be fun even at the high school level. Shrewsbury Public Schools has prepared me extremely well for my journey to come, and I can't wait to see where the path takes me. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. At this point, I'll open it up, turn it back to Mr. Wensky and see if there's any comments from the committee.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sawyer, and thank you very much for presenting. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Dr. McGee?
Just remarkable stories, and congratulations to you and to your parents. I'm curious to know whether you find yourself drawn to any particular careers at this point, or whether it's still too early for you. could start?
Right now, I'm looking to go into business, but I'm also interested long-term in going into sports medicine. I find that very interesting, because personally, I've had lots of injuries, as a rower, and I've definitely learned a lot about my body and find it very intriguing.
Personally, I'm looking to pursue business, specifically possibly finance, but I'm gonna see once I start taking some classes.
I've always been very interested in biology. Last year, I also got really interested in math as well. So I'm hoping to pursue a career that combines those interests.
I'm currently undecided, but I'm looking into possibly either pre-med or education in college.
Thanks.
Very good. Ms. Heffernan, yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. And I think just hearing these stories, right? And it's the well-roundedness that you're presenting is really so impressive, from the academics and the music and the arts and the sports and the health and all these extracurricular civic engagement, and really very clearly both your work ethic, but the positive contributions you're making to the to our whole community, both in the schools, but also really in large throughout Shrewsbury, is really very impressive. And I want to thank our parents for being here. It's very nice to be able to actually be in a room again and see parents and kids and have them here, because you're sort of what we aspire for all of our kids to have all of these different opportunities. Just one question, like my colleague asked. I wonder, given that you're involved in so many different things, in one or two sentences, what feels different about this year as compared to last year? What are some of the things that are really good to have back that maybe you were particularly missing, or you feel are nice things? Because you're obviously all involved in many different facets. So I'd love to know what really sparks extra joy for you to be able to do again, I hope.
Yeah, I'm glad to have rowing back. We lost our fall season last year, and our spring season wasn't really the same. And it was just a breath of fresh air, coming into tryouts. There was no restrictions, and we just had a blast. We were supporting each other. There was so much energy, and it was just fun. It was contagious.
Yeah.
The energy was contagious, yeah.
I'm personally just super excited to be back, working with people and seeing people's faces. Even with the masks, it's just a totally different environment, being in person versus Zoom. So
Yeah, for me, it's also being with everyone and working together again, whether it be with orchestra all back together or the golf team, we're all together again, and it's really nice change from last year.
Yeah, I was taking school fully online last year, so getting to be back and to see everyone again after having over a year off was really amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Mr. Palic.
Just a comment, not a question, to say that, and I know my colleagues know this too, this is always a favorite night for us on school committee. And it's really heartwarming to see all of the success that all of our students continue to achieve. But, what's impressive to me is, these are awards that highlight your own academic achievements. But beyond that, before us are four very community-minded students. And what I hear tonight is very much more than your own accomplishments. It's leadership roles, being involved with the community and helping others, and that's just really inspirational. So this is always a favorite night, but particularly this last year and a half, this is just lifting me up quite a little bit.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first off, congratulations to all of you on this tremendous honor. Certainly appreciate your passion for learning, and all that you're doing both inside and outside the classroom, I think is tremendous. A lot of multitasking going on. You're all in multiple clubs and doing public service and really excelling academically. And I think there's a lot to be proud of in the accomplishments. I'd also like to thank your families for being here. Thank you all for being here in person. As Mr. Palic said, it's really special to us to have you here as opposed to on Zoom. So thank you so much. And I do appreciate the gratitude you provided your teachers and your families, because it truly takes a village for the success that you've accomplished. So congratulations to you all. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
Well, certainly underscore everything that the committee members said. We're enormously proud of these students as exemplars of what Shrewsbury students are all about. And again, it's an awful lot of effort and hard work that they've put into achieving these things, but as was mentioned, they're not only focused on their own success, they're focused on assisting others, leading others, and trying to make their school community and the community at large a better place. And that's something that we care a lot about, and it's really a privilege to be able to honor them this evening. So typically, under normal times, we would have them come around and shake hands and things like that. I am going to give each student a certificate that was provided by the respective organizations. That's to commemorate their honor. And if it's okay with, if you don't mind, Mr. Wensky, I'm going to stand behind them with Mr. O'Connell. We'll take a quick picture, and then we'll let these students go on their way, because as you heard, they're very busy.
Yes, correct.
So let's do that, and maybe before, as we do that, how about a round of applause for our... Maybe if you like fold it back or hold it this way for the photo, that's yours, Penelope. Maddie. Maybe before you face Mr. Wensky. Mr. Wensky, do you mind doing a photo? We'll do a
Oh,
photo.
yeah.
Give you guys a photo op.
I can do that.
I promise. Maybe Mr. O'Connell over here.
Yep. All right.
I can see a smile behind them.
Yeah. Very good.
All right,
Got it.
I'm gonna switch it around so your folks can get there. All right, one Cromer's down over there. You good? Excellent.
All right, very good. Okay, the next item on our agenda is also a time-scheduled appointment, is a report from the Student Advisory Committee. For some background, under the Massachusetts Educational Reform Act, school districts are required to have a student advisory committee consisting of 5 high school students who are elected by the student body. The SAC is required to meet with the school committee during the year to review various issues of concern to the student body. Mr. Andrew Smith is the Shrewsbury High School school sciences or social sciences teacher, serves as the faculty advisor to the SAC. And the agenda is enclosed. So with that, I'll hand it over to the SAC. If you wouldn't mind, maybe from my left to right, if you would introduce yourself.
My name is Anushka Mukhopadhyay, and I'm a senior.
My name is Laura Lee, and I'm a junior.
My name is Shalini Biju, and I'm a junior.
My name is Risha Parikh, and I'm a senior.
My name is Nikita Ram, and I'm also a senior.
Great. Thank you so much.
The start of a new school year.
So students at Shrewsbury High School began the 2021 to 2022 school year by welcoming the class of 2025 and adjusting to a new school environment. Without a doubt, the privilege of having desks together has made school feel as if the pandemic never struck. Within classes, there are more students engaged in talking to their peers, being that desks are put in groups, and there's a less isolated feeling throughout the class. Additionally, the students around the school feel indeed safe with the change made. Personally, my experiences have been very rewarding as I've been able to talk to peers I have previously not interacted with in a very long time.
COVID testing has resumed at SHS. Many students value the opportunity to conveniently get tested and are appreciative of the measures being taken to keep us and our community safe. The procedure is the same from last year, which is a quick nasal swab. Some students are welcoming to this, and while others feel that it can be a little bit time-consuming. These kits are handed out in students' respective lunches and are collected near the main office. In total, there have been 47 positive COVID cases at SHS, 5 being from last week, but it's clear that this trend is going downward compared to previous weeks. All in all, students are continuing to work hard and are taking the proper measures to keep our school as safe as possible during these trying times.
Lunch at SHS has returned to something closer to normalcy. There is no longer a requirement for students to sit further apart from each other, although there is a section in the front lobby for socially distanced eating. Masks are required when not eating and when getting up from seats to move. Some students have expressed concern at sitting so close to others during lunch, while others are glad to spend time with friends in an environment similar to how lunch was before the pandemic. Additionally, the senior plaza is once again open, and seniors have given positive feedback about being able to eat outside.
Around 4 times a quarter, students attend an advisory period on day 5s. During this full period block, students and teachers engage with the Character Strong curriculum, participating in various community building activities. students understand and appreciate the purpose and goal behind the advisory period. There have been mixed feelings about the types of activities. Some students feel advisory can be improved with more activities of choice, while other students love the bonding experience and feel a strong sense of community.
Student activities. There's no better way to kick off the new year than with some school pride. SHS is starting the school year with various events and fundraisers to showcase our school spirit. SHS's Spirit Week occurred from September 25th to 29th and was a wonderful way for students to be able to showcase their school spirit and unity. The week kicked off with Class Color Day, with each class in their respective colors, freshmen in purple, sophomores in red, juniors in orange, and seniors in green. Tuesday transitioned into 90s Day, and students wore their favorite sports team apparel on Wednesday. The whole school came together to celebrate USA Day on Thursday, and on Friday, everyone was able to show their colonial pride. The annual Spirit Rally was postponed to October 1st due to weather concerns, but classes were excited to compete in the fun events and earn points for the class cup. This rally was held outside on the turf, different from previous years, but students thoroughly enjoyed the light breeze while working hard to earn points for their class. Many teachers even joined in on the fun. The current standings are seniors in first, sophomores in second, juniors in third, and freshmen in fourth.
For years, Colonial Way has been a key part of Spirit Week celebrations. After missing Colonial Way for the past 2 years, students were very excited to gather together, enjoy tasty food from various food trucks, celebrate with music, and learn about the many clubs at our school. The day ended off with a football game against Neshoba Regional High School, which students were excited to display their SHS pride. It was a very successful event where our community was able to come together.
There are several fundraisers that take place in the fall to support important causes. Most recently, Coins for a Cure, which aims to support breast cancer research, was very successful, raising nearly $1,000 in 1 week. Students were happy to donate toward this cause and contribute to their peers for the class cup. The Thanksgiving food drive will be another opportunity to serve the community and will be taking place soon.
Freshmen and sophomores were able to attend the activity fair in September to learn more about the different clubs at SHS. The fair took place in the gymnasium during a homeroom period, where over 30 clubs set up posters and small booths to display information about their club. It was a great opportunity for incoming students to explore their interests.
On October 2nd, our community gathered in downtown Shrewsbury for a 1-mile walk, hosted by Mr. O'Connell and members of the Zoe's Rocks team to honor suicide awareness. There was music, food trucks, and a candlelight vigil to honor all of those affected by suicide. There was an excellent turnout, and it was wonderful to see people from all over Shrewsbury gather to show their support for our town surrounding this solemn topic. This is a great way to bring awareness about this prevalent issue to our community. The fall concert at SHS was a grand success and ultimately represented our music department wonderfully. Many students from different ensembles, including chamber orchestra, wind ensemble, treble choir, mixed choir, and the a cappella group, performed multiple pieces of music that truly showcased their hard work during the first quarter. Their turnout was incredible, and the new addition of electronic brochures allowed for the concert to run with ease and COVID safe. Students are extremely excited to finally be able to perform to a live audience, and the fall concert was a great way to kick off a fulfilling year for the Sea Wing.
And as Dr. Sawyer touched upon earlier, athletics have been a huge success thus far at SHS. Various teams like the boys and girls varsity soccer, girls volleyball, and football teams competed in playoffs and further tournaments, and recently the girls varsity field hockey team and boys cross country team won the district championship. Overall, students feel like the season feels back to normal and is running smoothly, and we are proud to say that there has been no COVID shutdowns. It is also great to have fans being able to attend these athletic events, as there is always a great representation of our school coming together as one. Additionally, the esports team has picked up and is currently running a fundraiser. As we transition out of fall into winter sports, students are excited to see how SHS competes and are sure our athletes will be ready.
Senior events. Shrewsbury seniors are working diligently on their college applications and have begun submitting them for colleges to view. On top of that, the SHS community is working hard towards a gratifying senior experience. From August 2nd to 5th and August 9th to 12th, rising seniors at SHS attended Application Boot Camp, where they received assistance on the Common App, review on their essays from admissions directors from nearby schools, and practice with interviews. Nearly all students who attended considered the program incredibly helpful. For seniors who could not attend Application Boot Camp, a separate Nuts and Bolts Night was run on September 14th to go over the same information. The event was well attended, and students were especially appreciative of the breakout sessions that occurred afterwards, which allowed them to ask specific questions to their guidance counselors. College deadlines are approaching, but the class of 2022 have been well equipped.
The first senior event of the year was the Senior Cookout, which took place on September 25th. Seniors had a variety of meal options from hot dogs to burgers, listened to music, got their senior t-shirts, and attended the football game afterwards.
And the morning of our school's Fall Spirit Rally, the seniors all gathered in the gym lot of the campus around 6:30 in the morning with music and breakfast. This was a very fun event planned, and it definitely brought the senior class a sense of togetherness, and it was convenient that it was outside so we could have our masks off. Overall, this made the seniors very happy, and it was followed by a very energetic welcome to the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors of our school by the gym entrance. Seniors were excited to be able to connect with their friends, celebrate their last year, and come out on top on field day.
Thank you for your continuous support of the SAC, and now we are open for any questions.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Mr. Palage?
Thank you all for the presentation. It's always very helpful to hear from SAC. We appreciate the work that you do, and just sort of a kind of a general question to start off with, and that's just about stress and anxiety that you're seeing among your classmates. We're all seeing and hearing anecdotally in society at large after reopening, people being stressed out, not interacting with one another well. Compared to pre-pandemic times, how do you feel the mood is? What are you seeing as you interact with your peers? How is that stress and anxiety? And how is everybody coping with that?
I think that for stress, I think every grade has different amounts of stress that they go through. I think that the transition from the remote to the in-person caused a little bit more stress in general from what I've seen. I think that sometimes the workload is a little bit different from last year, which is what maybe allowed some more students to have that stress as well. Anybody else?
Yeah, sure. So I think being in school 5 days a week definitely has helped for me. Being able to, I have more resources available, and I think the school is doing a really good job giving out those resources. It's very easy to know who to go to, who to talk to, and that's been really helpful for me.
Personally, I've seen that the workload has definitely increased with in-person learning and 5 days a week, and I think most students can also agree with it, so it's definitely like an adjustment. But I've also noticed that all of the activities going back to normal. For example, I really like participating in badminton club and tennis, and all these after-school activities that I really like hanging out with my friends. Those like balance out all the stressors, so yeah.
I've noticed that especially for students who were in the full remote learning program, the transition to full in-person with teachers and other classmates and a kind of like different curriculum is definitely different and caused quite a bit of stress from what I've heard from other people, especially because the online learning program, the curriculums weren't exactly the same, so there was some information, especially in AP courses, that is being like tested on in classes that we didn't learn.
Additionally, I think especially the junior class, because we've never had a full year of high school, so I think it's really hard, at least for me, like coming into this year, I think it was hard to like definitely adjust from like that online like hybrid environment. And even last year when we did have 5 days a week, it was just very different from what we have right now. So I think a lot of the stress does come from the workload rather than interacting with peers.
Thank you for presenting to us tonight. I wonder if I could just ask a little bit more about the Character Strong and advisory. Is that sort of a relatively newer endeavor? And I'm glad you mentioned it. And I probably would have asked if you hadn't. And I heard some maybe slightly mixed reviews about that. But maybe you could tell us, this is new for us. So what are you doing during that time? Like, what are some of the things that you're experiencing, whether you like them or you don't like them, but just help us understand kind of what that time looks like from your perspective?
Sure, I can start us off by saying, in advisory period, we kind of go over like some of the topics go over like togetherness, like community. So we'll sometimes look at a quote and sort of have a little group together and say like, what does this quote mean? How do we interpret it? And we sort of share that with the class. So I would say most of it is based on like a sense of togetherness and community-based learning.
Okay.
Anyone else want to say anything?
I've definitely noticed that there's been a lot of mixed feelings about advisory period. There's some students that really like it, where their classes are really together and their teachers are really engaged with the curriculum. But there's also other classes where the students don't really know each other that well, and they're feeling like the curriculum can be a little bit forced, and that and if teachers are not like super excited about it, it can get like a little bit boring.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people all understand like the purpose behind it.
Right.
Yeah, adding on to that, I think that so much of it like depends on your homeroom and like who your teacher is. Because like I personally like advisory because I think like my homeroom is pretty fun and I like the teacher. But I heard that like some of my friends in like other classes, their teacher isn't really super enthusiastic about it. But I think maybe as like time goes on and we get to know our homeroom and our teachers better, then there might be a shift in that.
I want to just appreciate the forthrightness. It's important for us to kind of understand and figure out what's a good use of time, right? And everything, there's always trade-offs. So thanks very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I think this role is so critical to the committee, especially in the year that you've come back to. I think you mentioned workload and the challenges there. I think it's also fair, too, to think about those that have come back to school in full from being all remote, as well as the freshmen that maybe entered in September of 2019 and are now starting as juniors for their first full year of high school. A lot of adjustments going on, and really appreciate the feedback that you can provide from your peers to us. Is very valuable to the committee. So thank you so much. Very well presented. Thank you to Mr. Smith as well for the preparation. Really appreciate it. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
Thank you. As student leaders, your perspective and as representatives is really critically important. And I think, as the committee members just mentioned, this year in particular, it's going to be important over the course of the year that we get a sense from you regarding how things are going from a student's perspective. I think that there are, it's gratifying to hear that you're feeling things are available to you, the resumption of various activities and pieces are good, and that that you have a good handle on where to get support if you need it. At the same time, whether it's advisory or any other element, this is a unique year coming back after a very different kind of experience that everyone lived through, and different people were affected different ways by that. So, and certainly, not only when you report to school committee, but I know that when you interact with Mr. Bazidlo, the other administrators, and through Mr. Smith, making sure that your voices, the voices of your fellow students are heard through you is very important. So thanks for coming this evening, and thanks for the information.
Thank you so much. All right, all set. On to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is also a time schedule appointment. It is the district's response to the pandemic report from Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much. So this is our latest update in terms of how things are going. We'll remind everyone that our primary goal this year is to provide opportunities for the students, like we just experienced this evening, to have full-time in school with minimal disruptions while utilizing a variety of mitigation strategies to minimize the risk of contracting COVID-19 when you're at school. Our approach is threefold: implementing those mitigation strategies to reduce risk, trying to create a sense of belonging to support students' social and emotional and mental health needs, and also providing learning opportunities that support their academic needs. We'll provide some of the national and state data to give some context again. Massachusetts continues to be an outlier in a good way where it comes to positivity rate. The most recent reported by Johns Hopkins is under 2%, and that's the second lowest measured in the United States. So that's good news for being here in Massachusetts. In terms of age cases, or cases by age rather, you can see on the slide that, they tend to report it out, they break it down differently, so I'd call your attention to the lower left-hand corner, where it's equal by decades. So, children ages 0 to 9, there's about 2,200 cases over the last report, and then 10 to 19, about 2,200 cases also, which is similar, a little bit less than ages 20 to 29. It's pretty consistent what we've been seeing over the course of the fall. Overall, cases have been dropping across the state and the nation, which has been good. As far as hospitalization, again, emphasizing that younger people are much less likely to be hospitalized. The chances, these are numbers that are based on per 100,000 people in the population. Children aged 0 to 11 years, about a 1 in 100,000 chance of hospitalization. A 0.2% chance of students aged 12 to 17 years, and a 1.5 chance for those 18 and 19 years. So that's a good news story, of course, in terms of the significant effects. Obviously, the older population is much more at risk for hospitalization due to COVID. In terms of Shrewsbury itself, the last 14-day positivity rate was just over 2%, which is well below the 5% benchmark that is set by Johns Hopkins and through the World Health Organization, actually, that Johns Hopkins uses as their benchmark in terms of, keeping things open, keeping things more normalized in terms of things like being able to attend school in person. So we're well below that and remain that way. In terms of the comparison of the town-wide total cases and how many Shrewsbury students there were each of the last few weeks, proportion remains relatively similar, but again, good to see that the number came down a bit for the week ending November 5th, and we're hoping to see a trend there. You'll note that the current week thus far, and when we measure our weeks in order to align with the way the town reports, we're measuring them Saturday through Friday. We're here on Wednesday evening, and officially, we've had 0 cases this week. So that's a very encouraging sign. It sounds like I did get a text a little earlier this evening from Ms. Freeman, our Director of School Nursing. I think our pooled testing is picking up some positive cases, so our streak is going to be broken, unfortunately, but it's been nice to have several days in a row with no cases at all in the district, and we're hoping that's the beginning of a good trend. That remains to be seen. In terms of the, again, cases this week to date, we're 0. And you can see the cumulative total that we've had 145 cases as of this point. Of those, 116 were found to be in school during their infectious period, and 30 of those cases have been traced to either possible or probable exposure in school. I believe there are 20 possible and 10 that are probable. This is just a snapshot of the COVID dashboard, just reminding those who are watching that every Monday this is posted on our website. There's a prominent link right on our homepage, so you can look at the data in detail each week. The next slide is actually a new display. This is a bar graph that shows the number of cases by day since the school year began. The top number there might be a little hard to see on the screen is 8. So that's the most single cases we've had reported in one day. A lot of days where there's just 1 or 2 reported, and you can see that there's some consistency. That's usually a small number of cases on a daily basis that are seen. And we're hoping to see that even drop lower. Of course, this coming week we've had several days of 0 in a row, which is good. The next slide shows it by week. You can see that very first week was only a 3-day week, and then we were pretty consistent. Some numbers dropped through September. We had a bit of an uptick in October, up to over 20 cases for a couple of weeks in mid-October. Since then, it's been coming down. In the last 2 reported weeks through the end of the week, last Friday on November 5th, we had 2 weeks in a row with 13 cases. This next display is a visual of the cases by school. You can see the high school has had the most. They're our largest school, of course. Beale and Sherwood have had the next highest number, and you can see what the numbers are for the rest of the schools there. We've had 2 that were district employees not assigned to one particular school, and you can see bookended by only 2 so far at our preschool as well. So that gives a sense of sort of by school. The next display shows you by grade level. And so it's interesting in that the senior class has the most, but closely the 4th grade. And it will be interesting to see how these numbers start to adjust now that students who are of younger age are starting to get vaccinations. And so over the next month plus, be interesting to see what happens with numbers in our elementary and at Sherwood, as students who were previously ineligible for vaccinations will begin to get them. So we'll be curious to see how the data trends with that as one factor among others. This next bar graph just shows you the number of cases broken down by students versus staff. The staff cases, of course, some of them don't live in Shrewsbury, some do. So that number doesn't necessarily trend with the town cases. That's why we compare student cases to town cases. But that is our breakdown there. Also just want to update on the test and stay program, which we've been speaking about over the last several weeks. Again, this is just some background for those who may not be familiar with it. This is through the State Department of Education, provides all the funding for this. It's an optional program. It is only available by state rules for close contacts to a case that was identified in school. The individual is not, if the student or staff member is not vaccinated and they're not symptomatic, they're eligible to, in the morning, get a Binax Now rapid test. And if the test is negative and they're asymptomatic, they can attend school that day. I believe at the last meeting it was mentioned that we have shifted the location. Originally, we were working out of the old Beal, but we needed to move because they start to shut down the old Beal school. And there is now a trailer that's been established at the Maple Ave fields, right at behind the soccer and softball fields there in the back parking lot. So it's a good central location with plenty of parking, and it's been going well so far to have that be the location. It's been a very valuable program. You can see in the next slide that we've had over 650 individuals participate in that program. Over 1,900 tests. Of those, there have been 18 positive results, just a little under 1%. And we've saved over 1,900 student learning days. So this has been a really, really important program for us. Over time, it will be used less because those who are vaccinated are not eligible for this. It's not necessary. If you're vaccinated and you're a close contact, you can continue to attend school. And as more students at the elementary level become vaccinated, if they're a close contact, there'll be less need for this. But we know we will have an unvaccinated population of some percentage. So it remains a very important way for us to keep kids in school instead of having them quarantined. In terms of the routine safety testing, also known as surveillance pooled testing, that weekly test is going on. We're still at only about 25% of our students and staff total participating. That's something that, again, we've been working very closely with the state provider. This shifted over to being state-run, and so we have to follow their guidelines and use their vendors. It has been improved. I give Mr. Collins and Ms. Freeman credit, along with Ms. Yu, to continue to move this and get it to be more effective and hopefully increase participation. And you can see there's been 14 positive test results so far. So again, it's a way to provide some peace of mind and try to catch cases while they're asymptomatic before they spread further within the school setting. And so again, just a reminder of the primary goal: to keep kids in school with minimal disruptions and minimizing the risk of spread within the school. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that the committee has.
Great, thank you so much. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Dr. McGee.
Excellent report as usual. One question has to do with the positives that we have. Do we keep track of how many of those are breakthroughs of people who've previously been vaccinated?
We are working to do that. We have not, there's a question we do have to ask, of course, to be able to know how we deal with the case. And so that is something that the nurses working with Ms. Freeman have been documenting. And now that we have larger numbers, I think we're at a point where we may be able to report out on that a bit. When we get smaller numbers, we wanted to be careful about that, just because different people are comfortable or not comfortable sharing their information on their own. But now that we're a little deeper into the school year, I think that's something that we can get some data on and help get a sense of that. But there are certainly breakthrough cases. But there are certainly a number where people are not vaccinated as well.
Yeah.
Great. Ms. Heffernan.
Yeah, just as a point of parental feedback, I love the surveillance program. We've been enrolled in it for as long as we can, and I'm noticing more and more this year. And I wonder if it's just the kids getting tired of all of this. They're routinely coming home with it still in their backpack. And so we know it's a challenge for families to remember to do the swab and put it in. And if there's anything particularly on those younger grades that we can kind of, I'm just imagining the challenges of the teachers, of course, if they make an announcement and a kid's in the bathroom, or I don't know what's going on there, but it's always, I think for the parent community, trying to get it all the way through the finish line, right, and all the steps along the way. So if there is anything that can be done to just as a little reminder, because when they come home in the backpack, I think, we'll see you next week, and we'll try again. And I also know it's just a wasted resource as well, right, for the whole that we're paying for that, and it's obviously not an effective use. So Maybe I'm alone, but I'm probably not with elementary kids who can't seem to kind of get all of those pieces done.
And it's not limited to elementary students. It's a point well taken, and we continue to work with the contractors around how they can deploy those resources as effectively as they can, and then how can we use our resources as a school district for things like that, reminders, visibility around drop-offs, during that time. And of course, schools are very busy when kids are entering and leaving, and I know it's that morning on typically Tuesday when they're collected. How can we signal that better? So that's something we'll definitely take under advisement, and I think we can improve. And just to be clear, we are paying in the sense that we're all taxpayers, but the cost of the program, just to remind people, is borne by the state entirely. There's no local dollars being used. Last year, the program we stood up was a program that was paid for out of COVID funds that were directed directly to our district. But certainly, it's not something that we would have the capacity to continue, and I'm grateful that the state has taken it on. But with that, of course, it comes that it's their program. They have certain ways they require you to interact with it. And I will say that I know even on an earlier webinar that was done statewide to update people on the program, this was probably maybe a month or so ago, I know that the people on the call from the department were actually holding up Mr. Collins and Ms. Freeman in Shrewsbury as an exemplar about the putting a central test and stay place. Their initial program was to have test and stay happen at each individual school every morning, which we just didn't see the way that we'd have resource to do that, and it's a much more effective and efficient way to do that centrally. So I think just as we've found ways to solve some of those issues, I'm sure we can do better with those reminders and making sure we collect what kids have brought to school. So thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Thank you for the report, Dr. Sawyer. As always, appreciate the consistency in the presentation and the data provided to the public. I think it's a really good public service. Also great to see the success we've had with the Test and Stay program with 1,900 student learning days saved. It's really, really well done. So thank you to all involved for that. Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is also a time-scheduled appointment. It's a report for the World Languages Department. Shrewsbury Public Schools World Languages Department has been adapting their practices to align with the new Massachusetts World Languages curriculum frameworks. Additionally, the department has been pursuing how to best take advantage of the state's Massachusetts Seal of Biliteracy program. Here to present to us today is Ms. Amy Clowder, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, and also Mr. Kenneth Almeida, who's the Director of World Languages. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to introduce Ken Almeida, who is the Director of World Languages. He teaches and leads at the high school, but he's also responsible for supervising educators in grades 7 to 12. And you may recall that initially he stepped up to lead as an interim director. Sure. I'm really proud to affirm his official appointment and to know that we can rely on his skills in the long term. And I'm confident that you'll see why this evening as he talks in greater detail. I just want to make sure that as we begin, thank you, I want to describe, Ken will describe the new standards and the resulting work for the department that will follow. But I want to frame the work that his department is engaged in a larger context and bring us back to what seems like a document we created a long time ago to guide our vision for student success, the Portrait of a Shrewsbury Graduate. In many ways, the work of the World Language Department contributes as well to a larger district vision. They're not just working to improve student experiences by reviving the curriculum. And there's two particular aspects of the Portrait of a Graduate that I want to call your attention to, and then I'm going to cede the floor to Ken so that you get the most of time with his details. But one area really to look at in terms of developing language skills and the implications for doing that well is global citizenship. So when you look at some of the goals we had, you can see that we predated some of the work that the Department of Education has espoused in their new standards. Consultant Katie Novak, when she came to work with the district leadership team, helped us kind of do a crosswalk document between our district goals and our new initiatives for professional development. She said, wow, it's really impressive to see how you anticipated some of the things that would be really important. And I think This is a good example of that. So as you can see, the better students can understand language and culture, the more able they're able to kind of access and analyze information, as well as to understand broader cultural perspectives of other people and engage in more productive conversations. And then the second aspect of the Portrait of the Graduate, I think that this work connects with, is building collaboration and communication skills, which is no surprise when you're talking about learning a language. But being able to articulate your thoughts and understand how to do that with a broader context for how body language is interpreted, expressions that you use in certain social situations, understanding the aspects of a team and the role of language, both spoken and unspoken, is really critical. And so I'm very grateful to the department and to Ken for kind of advancing this district work through the lens of his department work. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about this huge moment in world language education. I just wanted to remind you that the frameworks hadn't been updated since 1999. So, and what a way to start by looking at the vision statement for the framework. I think it's a powerful one, in fact, and I think it provides students, teachers, and all stakeholders with kind of like what is our purpose? What do we do day to day, and what type of student do we want to cultivate? And before, that purpose had been kind of a little nebulous, and it makes us think of what our purpose is in the classroom, and what do we want? Do we want students to be good with verbs, or do we want students to be good producing language? And I'm sure that this probably rings true to some of you here. You can say, oh, I went to, I took 4 years of a world language and I can't speak one word. And so I think what the new framework does is it helps answer that question, and it really makes us, kind of embrace how world language education is different today. And the reason for it is the focus on what proficiency is, and producing students who will have high levels of language proficiency, and not students who can conjugate verbs and make sure adjectives agree with nouns and gender and number. Those things are important, but those are components of the language, and we need our students to be able to be comfortable in producing language. I want to give you a comparison. If I were a music teacher, for instance, and if my end purpose were for my student to play a piece, if I had been focusing on assessing my students' awareness of the particular notes in a piece and never having them play the piece, for instance, that's what this new framework does. It makes educators look at and reflect on what they do, and make sure that the assessment and the learning experiences in the classroom focus on language production and what students can do in the language. Another thing about the vision statement that I like to tie into our district, which I'm really fortunate to work in, is how the high levels of linguistic and cultural proficiency really tie in with our core values of high standards and expectations for all students. Another part of this vision statement is that also ties into one of our core values, is the respect and responsibility core value, which we can see students will use this language to tell their own stories and understand the stories of others. And that really goes along with our district's work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So trying to just looking at this statement and say, how does it affect teachers? How does it make us reflect on our practice? And as well, how do we as a district kind of align with this vision statement? Next slide, please. What I really like about this new framework is that it also provides some accountability for district directors, department heads, curriculum experts, by providing us with a list of what effective world language departments do. And on this slide, you'll notice that the new framework tells us not only what we should expect our students to do, but how we as departments get to high levels of proficiency with our students. And I want to focus on some areas that we have been focusing on and we need to focus on even further. First of all, we will use these guiding principles as we delve into our curriculum work, but we have been focusing on including and benefit all students in our program. Last year, you were kind enough to approve the changes to our program of studies for our beginning level language learners to kind of mirror in an equitable fashion what students would experience in the first stages of learning in the middle school program, which is 2 years. So traditionally, we had been making students begin at the high school level learning what they traditionally learned in 2 years in 1, and that wasn't really equitable. And so that was one change that we've already made before the new framework, which went into effect this year. We've also been traditionally focused on high levels of linguistic and cultural competency. However, through a revision of assessment, we're going to look at that in a different way and find metrics in a different fashion. We're going to be focusing on, during curriculum work, on making cross-disciplinary content connections. World language curriculum is now written at all levels with the AP themes as kind of guiding themes for curriculum. We're also going to be connecting students to communities throughout the world. I know that COVID and turmoil in Europe has kind of put a halt on our traveling program at the high school, but I also know that one thing that we've learned through COVID is how really connected we are and how accessible other people and other cultures are. So we're going to be finding ways to bring the world to our classrooms, which currently we do have some teachers who have connections with some schools abroad. And I know, for instance, Heather Ledger has invited classrooms from France into our Shrewsbury High School classrooms before the pandemic, and they've had some exchange, and it was really interesting because it was for mutual benefit. The students in France would hear English, and the students in Shrewsbury would hear French, and it was kind of neat for them to have that experience. In terms of SEL competencies, we do have some practices, but we are going to kind of embed them in our curriculum work. But we do have some staff that are already on, pioneers in this work. I just want to make mention of a few. In terms of the competencies, SEL competencies of self-management and awareness. I remember one anecdote. Our teacher, Susanna Pierce, a teacher from Oak, very talented teacher. She started this work even before school began. She sent students, and I have one on my laptop, and it's running out of treads because I'm using it so much. She sent her students calming strips before the year began, kind of to teach them self-regulation and self-management, and I think that's wonderful, and a parent actually told me about that. At the high school, we have teachers who are fostering the competency of self-management and awareness in terms of weekly check-ins using the target language. When we saw the UDL professional development, some of the teachers right away said, as Katie Novak was presenting, they Googled some of those check-ins, those quick check-ins that were in the target language. And I know Kate Babigian at the high school is now offering weekly check-ins to her students in Spanish. And, our teachers are really monitoring the well-being of our students. And responsible decision-making, that SEL competency, I want to give a shout-out to the amazing Liao Chinwei Ye. She's been a pioneer with this whole proficiency mindset in terms of world language curriculum. She had her students write pledges using the script in Mandarin on what they promised to do for the environment. And the pledges, I think she brought here to Town Hall, and the students, I believe they placed them, she said that they hung them on here in the Town Hall. So again, we're already including some of these guiding principles in our work even before we started. Next slide, please. So I keep talking about proficiency, and what is proficiency? Proficiency is, in 2012, the ACTFL, which is the American Council of Teaching a Foreign Language, provided proficiency guidelines, and their description of what individuals can do with language in terms of speaking, writing, listening, and reading in real-world situations and in a non-rehearsed context. These proficiency levels are now what we're going to use as benchmarks for measuring our students in terms of the targets we set for our class. So the new framework is organized by these proficiency targets, these proficiency levels. And what we did last year, and I want to give, again, a shout out to our department, because in the midst of the pandemic, they embraced this. We were already planning for this change, and what we did is we set up proficiency targets for levels 7 through 12 in our program in order to set the targets for learning experiences, as well as to compare results at the end of the year and at the end of our program by using ACTFL terminology. In terms of the standards are organized by the proficiency levels, and within each proficiency level are 3 domains, and standards are written based on practices in these domains. Next slide, please. So what I picked this closet because I would like to, make a comparison between the 1999 framework and this year's framework. I think that, I'm being critical here, but I think the old framework was kind of a messy closet. And the new framework, what it did in layman's terms, is it organized this closet. So imagine you've kept all of your children's clothes from infancy to Christian's age, for instance. And before, your closet was organized by article of clothing, right? What the new standards does is it organizes by outfit according to age. So the new standards organized by proficiency level. So at that level, we know, or we expect our students to do these types of things. And that's what we needed in terms of a framework, was something where we could identify and set as benchmarks for our students. So it wouldn't seem so arbitrary. So we knew what exactly we were looking for at each level. Next slide. An initiative that connects directly with the framework's vision of high levels of linguistic proficiency for all is the Seal of Biliteracy. And what the Seal of Biliteracy does, it answers the question, how do we measure progress towards goals that we set for our students in world language? And how do we promote equity in all languages, whether they be studied at school or a home language? So again, talking about the framework's practice in the standards comes social justice. And this slide I took from the workshop on implementing the Seal of Biliteracy, and I think it's a powerful one. It says, by recognizing all students' linguistic assets regardless of the language that students speak or sign, we create more equitable schools. So if we want to if we expect high levels of linguistic proficiency, it should be in all languages, regardless of if they're a home language or if they're learning at home. So what is the Seal of Biliteracy? Next slide. Seal of Biliteracy is what we've been waiting for. It's a way to recognize high levels of proficiency in a language other than English. We have the Amcas for English, and that's how we measure students' performance against standards, and the Seal of Biliteracy now does that for languages other than English. So it's a way to recognize students who have high levels of linguistic proficiency, but requirements are, I'll go through the requirements now. What do students and families get out of the seal? Community college, for instance, in some state schools, I know Worcester State was in talks of it, but Salem State are now offering college credit to students who participate in the Seal of Biliteracy program and who get awarded the Seal of Biliteracy. So imagine a student who, I think of the student who spoke at graduation from Venezuela. Imagine she who spent her high school years studying English to be proficient in English, but giving her also the opportunity to be awarded for her proficiency in Spanish. So when she goes to college, or when a student who's awarded the seal goes to college, they already have college credits to capitalize on that asset, which is speaking another language. This is the English criteria for earning the Seal of Biliteracy. We look at the Amcas scores using the next gen. In order to earn the Seal of Biliteracy, you need to have high level of English proficiency. So the student must score between 472 and 500 on the next generation Amcas, on the grade 10 Amcas. Alternatively, if a student doesn't meet the criteria but scores between 455 and 471, they can show high level of English proficiency through a English proficiency assessment that's approved by DESE. And also our L students can use, to supplement their MCAS score, can use the Access exam, and they must score overall a 4.2 overall and 3.9 in composite literacy to be eligible for the English portion of the Seal of Biliteracy. In terms of our world language, or the language other than English criteria, students need to score what ACTFL determines as the intermediate high proficiency level on approved assessment. We're looking at the ACTFL Apple exam, and students must score an I5 on all domains. And what I mean by domains is interpretive speaking, interpretive reading or listening, interpersonal speaking, presentational writing. They must score a I5 in those domains. For our classical language learners, we are looking at the ALIRA exam to test for proficiency in Latin. To promote high levels of language proficiency, the Seal of Biliteracy program also offers the Seal with Distinction. So this is for students who even reach higher levels of language proficiency, the ACTFL Advanced Low Proficiency level on an approved assessment. So there's a possibility to be awarded the Seal of Biliteracy and the Seal of Distinction, with distinction. What students need to do is have the English language requirement that's measured through MCAS, as well as the world language testing requirement, and score intermediate high or for the Seal and advanced low for the Seal with distinction. So last year we did work as a department in taking the ACTFL proficiency benchmarks and indicators. We created rubrics to go with our target benchmarks for each level. And we changed our course names from, for instance, Spanish 3 to Intermediate Spanish 3. So each of those courses now have a proficiency level benchmark associated with them, and that's how we, going forward, are going to measure our students. How close are you to meeting that target? Are you meeting the target, or are you exceeding the target? And it's interesting because I'm seeing, as I make my way through classrooms, I'm seeing posters that educators, that our staff have in their classroom that show students where they are and what they need to do to go to the next level. And I'm hearing conversations between staff about leveling up, so to speak. This is what you need to do. This is what I need to see from you to go on to the next level. And students are starting to identify themselves on those charts, the proficiency level charts. So this is just an indicator of someone who's intermediate high. what they're able to do in terms of speaking. I do have on the next slide a video of what an advanced speaker of English looks like. And so just to remind you, someone to earn this seal has to score intermediate high on the world language. And this video that I have, this brief video, is someone who has scored advanced in English, just to give you some perspective of what high level of linguistic proficiency looks like in English.
So I've got my essay written, and I've been working on it for about a week. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly.
Tell me a little bit more about your educational background. Did you study in Korea or the United States?
I studied until 1988. I was a sophomore in college, and I came here as a transfer student, first in Virginia, and as a computer engineer. In 1991, I came to Columbia University as an electrical engineer. I got a master and PhD at Columbia University in electrical engineering. But then in electrical engineering, there are a lot of different fields. And one of the fields that I was involved in is signal processing. Signal processing includes image processing. And part of my application of image processing technology is for medical imaging. That's why I joined.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue. So what makes the speaker an advanced speaker of English is that he is able to speak about topics that are outside of his immediate surroundings. So intermediate high speakers still speak about their the themes that are personal to them in everyday life. An advanced speaker of a language is able to speak about concrete and topics that are outside of everyday life, like academia, some of the language he was using. What are the district responsibilities in terms of implementing the Seal of Biliteracy? I can tell you that number one has been done, which is enrolling the district in the database through DESE. Number two is ready to go. We're ready to inform the community, and that's why I came here today to talk to you about it. And the community needs to be informed in all languages that are spoken in our community. And so I did conduct some research in order to inform the community and created a language database. After we inform the community, we assess. We give the APPLE exam or the ALIRA exam to our Latin students. And then we also have to figure out, for the students who are not world language students, what assessment, if their language isn't available through APPLE, which assessment we're going to give to them. And this is going to require some logistics work with Mr. Bazidlo and the rest of SHSLT. We record the results, we award the seal at graduation, and the final step is we have to report the data on our SIMS report. So Mr. LaRue and I will be talking in the near future on planning for that. How are we ready for the frameworks? Again, I just want to emphasize that I've been involved in a lot of discussions across the Commonwealth with other district leaders, and I can tell you that the road to ready has already started, but the end, it takes a long time. For instance, I have brought a director from Wayland High School, been in touch with her, and she actually offered a professional development course to our staff, and she tells us that their curriculum work started 7 years ago and still is a work in progress. So this is going to take a long time and a lot of training. We did do a language inventory in order to start the Seal of Biliteracy program. Differentiated courses were designed, like I said, at the novice level to support students on IEPs and make it equitable with those offered at OMS. Another thing that I'm really pleased is our heritage language courses. They're up and running. I have the pleasure of teaching heritage Portuguese, and it's the highlight of my day to see these students successful in their own language, but also curious and eager and wanting to learn more about it. We're having discussions on, the differences between colloquial Portuguese and formal Portuguese, but keeping the themes all based on their identity, because that's what a heritage language program should be about. We've had several professional development opportunities for world language educators. Our department time this year will be devoted on curriculum work, and I've offered extensive training for educators to become acclimated to the proficiency model in world languages. And like I said, our educators are started the year having conversations with their students and setting up goals. And now students get feedback in order to make those goals, to reach those goals. So here's some images from the home language inventory that I did. This was done with the collaboration of the English department at the high school, and I'm very grateful to Liza Trombley for her efforts in coordinating this and all of her help throughout my first and second year acclimating to this new role. She's been fundamental in helping me, and I thank her very much. If you notice, 45% of those polled, we polled about 1,300 students, identify a home language other than English. And the numbers keep growing. Our next slide shows the language inventory. So when I surveyed the students, it asked what language besides English is spoken at home, or what is your first language? We have the highest of students identified Portuguese as the language spoken at home, and that's followed by the various Indian dialects as well.
So most improvements require investments, and Ken has talked a lot about the investment of time that his department has already put into this effort in order to kind of achieve better results for students. What's exciting to me is to look at a pathway for students to demonstrate proficiency even if they're not participating in a world language course through the Seal of Biliteracy program. But in order to be successful in kind of promoting the larger skills and the thrust of kind of the changes embedded in the new frameworks, we'll need to continue to engage in professional development and promote opportunities for collaboration, and also consider additional world language educators in order to lower some of the class sizes at Oak so that we can retain kids in world language once they begin, and then also to think about pivoting to support more students in their home language with heritage classes. And Ken has bravely gone first in kind of teaching that class and getting a sense of what that requires. But that's one of those initial things that we'll likely be looking to grow in the future. In addition, one of the things that's really clear from the state effort is recognizing American Sign Language as an important language to include in this effort. And so when we think about creating more inclusive schools and cultures that recognize a wide range of skills and abilities, I think that's a way that we can kind of connect again with other departments and think about students that we might not think of as language students who have a skill that we should recognize. So with that, we're open to questions or comments.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Almeida, Ms. Clower. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Ms. Fritz.
Excellent report that you had. I mean, we have it, I think it was 18 pages. I mean, it gave us so much information. No, it was excellent.
The passion shows.
No, it helped, you know, when I was reading through, it really helped me, being a non-educator, really understand, you know, what this new framework is, where it's moving toward, and also I think from a school committee perspective, that what is needed. And this is a great time because we'll be moving into our budget cycle. So I know to me it seemed maybe 1.5 FTE at Oak to assist with classes. Is that enough? Is there more that you think this program needs? Because I think this is what we definitely need to hear as we move forward.
I have to be honest, the novice level in particular, the best class sizes are the 15 range. And so at the high school right now, I have the ability to cap novice classes at 18, and I don't have that ability to do that at Oak. And so 1.5 would be nice, but of course the program, like Ms. Clower alluded to, offering ASL, offering world language Portuguese, I mean, our program definitely can grow.
Can grow from there.
And 1.5 is a good start,
Mhm.
particularly at Oak.
Great. And I really also appreciate the American Sign Language class. I think that's something, I mean, students can take it in college now. It's becoming very popular, and you can use it in so many different areas. I was really glad to see that that is a consideration, along with the heritage classes, I think is so important as we move forward. So, thank you. This is an excellent report.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ms. Heffernan.
Yeah, thank you also for the report. I'm wondering, one of the unfortunate decisions that those in these seats have had to make over the years are cutbacks to our world languages program, and I wonder if you can help me understand what, if anything, does the framework suggest is the optimal time to begin world language, this level of instruction to students, and if there isn't an optimal, what are some of our other peer sort of comparable districts doing in terms of when they begin these programs? Because obviously relatively recently we shifted at one grade level on that, but if you could speak to sort of where we are in comparison to either the standards or other state peers, that would be really helpful, as obviously another pretty significant budgetary impact that choices that we've had to make.
Absolutely. I think the good news is that when we set our proficiency targets last year for our current program, we took into fact what research shows in terms of how many hours it's required to reach those proficiency targets. So we preferred to work with what's been stable so far, which is 7 through 12. And so when we set up the targets for our classes, we looked at what ACTFL was saying in terms of how many hours is it needed to reach that proficiency target. Other districts are in fact, are starting it earlier, or world languages earlier, but in terms of how our programs has been designed beginning last year, we really looked at their research and said, okay, we can, let's focus on 7 through 12. Let's see what the research says in terms of how many hours we need in our program for each target level, and let's set the target levels from 7 through 12 according to the research. But learning a language, I mean, there are some districts that start this year. I know Hudson's starting dual language programs at the elementary level. The critical language period is really infancy on. But in terms, to answer your question, what we did last year was we looked at what research says in terms of getting our students to have high levels of linguistic proficiency. And so we looked at the hours that it takes to be a novice mid, which is our 7th grade benchmark, and we set the target for that, and so on and so forth.
I guess really more for discussion amongst my colleagues as we go forward with the budgeting process. It's what I take from that is you're operating in a budget constrained reality that you live in, and saying, given what I have, which is a seventh grade start, here are the hours that I'm going to need to get there. Versus I think of some of what is on our shoulders to ask the question about, and I'd maybe push you to think about if. Does the research tell us that we should be starting earlier? And if so, when and where? I can't probably start in infancy. And so, and we'll have to weigh those constraints, right? And provide some framework there. But I think when given the opportunity to share with us where we ideally maybe want to be, and that doesn't mean we could be there next year or in 2 years or even 3 years from now, but I don't even know what target we should be shooting for, right? And I don't know if, there are parents, when we were going through some of the budget process, who were talking about when we did, languages in 3rd grade and then 4th grade. I'm like, what do we want to get back to? Do we want to get back to something, or should we just focus on what we have now and just dive in more deeply? And it seems like you have plenty of work to do in that space.
Right.
And I guess I'm sort of like wondering that a little bit here, which is fine. We don't have to figure this all out tonight, but these are important conversations for us to kind of figure out how do we want to advance?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I can say is the earlier the better.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Pouch.
Just a comment. First of all, thank you for a really excellent detailed report. And like my colleagues, I learned a lot from this. I just wanted to comment that with regard to the DESE Seal of Biliteracy, I am pleased to see the validation of home languages spoken by students. Obviously, at the point of career, having that language skill becomes valuable, but I just like that there is a vehicle through which at the student level, we're able to recognize and acknowledge that as a skill, not just for careers, but in general. So just a comment that I'm really pleased to see us be able to lift up that is something that a lot of our students can do and recognize it as something that will be of value to them and to their peers.
Any further comments? Mr. Almeida, I'd like to thank you for the comprehensive report. I learned a lot about world languages, and I was struck by what you said about almost like compensating for like field trips, right? What we learned from COVID, is that we're very connected now virtually. Is that something that you would connect with other classrooms, like in various like countries, or how would that work?
What I envision, yes, I envision that happening. I envision having sister schools, but through the virtual platform. And Leo Shiye came to me with a proposal from a school in Taiwan, but it was something that needed to happen very soon, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to get it started. And then it also involved, unsupervised contact with these. And when we want to do something, I definitely want to make sure that it falls within the structure of the learning day, and make sure that it, these conversations with other schools happen in supervised settings. So, yeah, it's going to take some. That's what I envision in providing opportunities, and even guest speakers, people within the community who speak the target language. I mean, they are authentic resources.
Definitely.
And so that's what we need to provide: more authentic learning opportunities using authentic resources.
Absolutely. No, I love the idea of connecting, taking advantage of the technology that we've seen evolve over the last couple of years, just based on the situation. But thank you so much for the report. I appreciate it. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
Thank you. I want to thank Ms. Clowder for her support of the program and her support of Mr. Almeida. As she mentioned earlier, he stepped in as the interim director last year, did an outstanding job under very challenging circumstances, and we're very pleased to appoint him and remove that interim tag. I think a couple of things. First of all, I do appreciate the hard work that all of the world language educators are doing to shift to this new framework. Change is never easy, and I think that collectively and collaboratively, because I know that Mr. Almeida is promoting that, they're working together to implement some things that are shifts that really should benefit our students for all the reasons Mr. Almeida stated. And I just also want to add that I know that one of the benefits certainly of the director model that we have in Shrewsbury is that our directors are also teaching. And I'm excited and look forward to visiting at some point the Heritage Language Portuguese class. I know that's something that you've been advocating for many years, and it's wonderful that that's become a reality. But I do know both from a professional as well as a personal standpoint, because I've had daughters who've had the pleasure of having Senor Almeida as their teacher for Spanish. As I think was referenced earlier by the students, much of what we're trying to do, and certainly one of our goals this year, is to promote belonging. And building relationships with students and collectively with classes is critically important, whatever the subject is. And I know that Mr. Almeida is particularly skilled at that, and I know through his leadership we'll continue to bring that dynamic to the department, because I appreciated the examples he gave of ways that educators in the department were reaching out and making connections with students in ways that honored the new framework, but more importantly, we're making authentic connections with the students themselves. Because when students feel that connection with their educators, they are going to be much more motivated to learn and typically much more successful. So thank you for your leadership, and we appreciate the report, and we're looking forward to seeing how this evolves in the coming months and years.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Clowder, as well, for your support.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Almeida. Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is another time-scheduled appointment. It's a report on diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion. Ms. Clowder will provide information about action steps taken by Shrewsbury Public Schools in regards to diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion efforts in the district since her report to the committee in May of 2021. Ms. Clowder will also outline next steps and solicit feedback from the committee on the plan for the year. With that, I'll hand it back to Ms. Clowder.
Thank you so much. Although I'm the only person left at the table this evening, the work that I'm going to share really represents a collective effort of engaging a lot of stakeholder groups and really pragmatic and aspirational conversations about where we want to go and what's reasonable to achieve within a given year, knowing that we're on the verge of engaging in a longer strategic planning process soon to come. Thanks, Brian. So I included this slide as just a reminder that the work I'm going to describe tonight happens within a larger context. And in part, our efforts kind of acknowledge and appreciate the diversity represented by our students and their families, and the fact that that's grounded in our overall efforts to make schools welcoming spaces. Educators have known for a long time that meaningful relationships with just one adult at school can make a huge difference in terms of students' academic outcomes and really lifetime chances of success. And we know that that protective factor has been at play for a long time, and especially emphasized for students who may have experienced trauma. Yet the experience of school can also pose significant challenges, and our data from students suggests that we have some work to do in terms of really understanding some of those challenges faced by our students, especially students who have experienced marginalization either at school or in society. So the equity audit, followed by the murder of George Floyd and the public outcry about systemic racism, really raised awareness and brought urgency to fostering belonging in schools, which was an initiative already in place. And we understand that for a variety of reasons, some of our families face barriers, and that working together, we have the means to reduce or eliminate some of those barriers. So thinking about what are the changes that are within our control to kind of make students of color and families of color feel more welcome in our spaces is just guides kind of our overarching approach to some of these goals. So at the leadership retreat this past July, district leaders kind of crafted collective big picture goals. We captured consensus on these 4 data points that are pictured on your slide. The areas we identified include thinking about engaging families with diverse backgrounds, using data to identify achievement opportunity gaps, making sure that our staff match the diversity of our students to the extent that we can by increasing the diversity of our applicant pools, and also thinking, as I mentioned already, about how students experience belonging at school. We'll see the information as we move forward with action steps in these areas. We'll use the information that we gather within each goal to think about the strategic plan that goes forward after this year and into the next. So that we can think about how this work kind of will inform the next planning cycle. And in the next slides, I'm going to go into greater detail into each of these areas and kind of some of the action steps that are underneath them. So the first major goal was really increasing the diversity of our applicant pools, and I want to really acknowledge the efforts of Barb Malone, our Executive Director of HR, because Barb targeted hiring as an opportunity several years ago and has been researching kind of best practice and how districts who have been successful in recruiting diverse candidates have approached it. And part of it is educating the leadership team, and part of it is really thinking about the processes themselves. And you've heard her talk about some of the things we found by virtue of her research. But some of the things that are pictured as bullets on the slides are specific action steps that she wants to do in addition to that work. So adapting our search processes to use new web tools like I Am Diversity, thinking about posting positions in different ways and with different terminology, identifying kind of what's worked in successful search processes. So we had some successes this year, and that led us to think about how we could engage candidates to get a better sense of like, how did you learn about us and how could we replicate that? And then partnering with local universities to establish pipelines to teaching positions. And then finally, Barb has recruited a group of educators and leaders to participate in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's Teacher Diversification Professional Learning Community, and she'll be reporting out some findings from that group. They function essentially as a think tank representing different districts who have shared this goal of diversifying their applicant pools. So the next goal is continuing to invest in professional development. It was really gratifying to me to realize this year that we've had Dr. Armante Jackson come to Shrewsbury for a sustained amount of time, and that's really been affirmed by staff responses when we survey them about professional development. The saying, you need to put your money where your mouth is especially important when it comes to professional development. And so I think staff seeing that we're sustaining our focus, both in educating our staff about what these components mean and having a common language to talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, but also to think more deeply about how do we apply that understanding in our roles and what does it look like when we're working towards that. So we all benefit from sustained focus, and especially when it comes to aligning our efforts with our aspirations. And so the training we had on August 31st will be followed by professional development on early release days, and one of those strands will be to follow up with a staff course that was redesigned based on the district leadership team's participation in the Becoming a More Equitable course last year. So that will be one of the options that we will expect all educators in Shrewsbury to complete within the next 3 years. So focusing on how we can align our strategic priorities with our professional development plan is really the thrust of this goal. The next goal has to do with using data to inform our instructional practice. So I know you've seen this graphic a lot. You're probably sick of seeing this graphic. But for me, this is a way of saying, like, it's all connected. So looking at equity is a key part of having multi-tiered systems of support for students. And so principals are convening instructional data teams to kind of look at assessments by trimester. You've heard me talk about the STAR Universal Screener for reading and math. And then part of what we're also looking as part of that, in addition to monitoring student progress and achievement, thinking about participation. Who are the subgroups of students that show up for things? And how can we increase kind of engagement in opportunities like school programs, AP classes, honors classes, clubs and co-curriculars, that kind of thing. And really, I think, as we're recovering from the pandemic and still working through some of the challenges that follow a transition back to in-person learning, thinking about how we can adjust instruction and pacing to help kids kind of catch up, not quickly, not with one summer program, but sustaining kind of growth over time. That data that we have is really key to our being able to know how interventions are effective and what the pacing should be. Because we can see some common focuses for instruction for all kids at every grade, and that's just been really helpful to reflect with teachers about what that means for classroom instruction. The next goal has to do with engaging more effectively with families, and I can still remember handing out paper surveys at Coolidge on open house night, and then sitting with the school council to hand score them. We're really fortunate that we have more nuanced tools like SurveyMonkey and Panorama to collect data from families, and at the same time, we're aware that sometimes when we offer surveys, we have different levels of participation. So we're hoping that we can build on the baseline from last spring that we established with the Panorama tool, and to get another look at the extent to which students are experiencing belonging by repeating that second set of questions again. But also we're hoping to use that same tool to kind of engage families and to survey family perspectives, which is particularly important for students in grades K-2 because they're not typically included in the survey because it's just research practice kind of national norms are geared to grades 3 and above. So families will have some good perspectives about the extent to which their younger students are feeling a sense of belonging at school, and more importantly, kind of when they're not feeling a sense of belonging, what that's about. So we're planning to use that same tool twice more this year, once in the near future and then once again at the end of the year. So we should have 3 data points to kind of look at as a point of comparison and to talk about what are some current Shrewsbury Public School practices and procedures like registration, how facile we are with translation, policies that might need to be updated that hinder family engagement and or the transfer of information from home to school in ways that really impact student experiences. So the heart of that goal has to do with increasing engagement, particularly for marginalized families. The next goal has to do with really using that feedback cycle in a deliberate way. I know that when we've talked last May, I shared with you the kind of the improvements cycle that you see pictured on the slide here. We are very aware, if we have a member sitting right here, that the town has kind of a parallel group doing a self-study around some of these issues, and they issued some recommendations from 2 different subcommittees that we've been sitting with. And so one of the things we need to do is to consider some subsequent actions we might take in light of those recommendations, and to hear some progress updates from other district leaders about that. And so Dr. Sawyer will be working with the coalition and also working with the leadership team to kind of think about and reflect together on what next steps might be in lieu of those recommendations. And then something that's squarely in my wheelhouse and on my mind is, educators are accustomed to adjusting instructional plans to reflect updated standards, as you heard Mr. Almeida talk about this evening, or in response to emerging research on best practice. In the past years, we've reviewed curriculum materials for bias, and this last goal really seeks to go a step further by considering what new materials we might need to counter bias, and how we might better foster improved understanding and appreciation of diversity within the curriculum. So the instructional coaches and curriculum coordinators in grades K to 8 are going to elicit some teacher representation to look at curriculum materials that address anti-racism, racial literacy, diversity, belonging, equity, and/or inclusion, because it's depending on what you're looking at. Some materials are kind of firmly in the social studies realm, and some are more fostering conversations through sharing of trade books and read-alouds. And so there's a lot to kind of weigh in terms of thinking about how we might embed it. For example, we might think about it in the context of social emotional learning lessons, and it could fit very nicely into a morning meeting conversation. Or we might think about making some changes to social studies curriculum to reflect more diverse perspectives. We might do a little bit of both. So we need to kind of sit and just look at what's available and engage some teachers in thinking about how to do that. And that's most important at the high school level, where in concert with the ongoing work being done in academic departments regarding the curriculum and instruction approaches that address anti-racism, educators need to develop a more robust educational program relative to the history of the colonials. And so I know that Jen DeFrancesca, who's the director of the Social Science and History Department, and Liza Trombley have particularly been thinking about how do they kind of address issues stemming from the Shrewsbury's nickname and the Shrewsbury community, and how do we represent best the history of Native nations when we're teaching in those domains. So Dr. Darnisa Amanta Jackson repeatedly emphasizes that we are imperfect people, and thus our efforts will be imperfect too. And I think especially in this area, when we have such a disconnect between the diversity of our population and the very white female majority of our educators, we're going to make incremental progress. We're going to learn some things, and then we're going to need to reiterate. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from the community how well our intentions transpire in terms of impacting their own students' experience. And also from students themselves. It's clear that despite our best intentions, some of our students and families do not feel like they belong yet, but I'm a big believer in the power of the word yet. And something that, having invested several years in these initiatives already, I can see growing awareness changing our approach to communicating and engaging families and students. So I really appreciate your support of this effort, and I'm really eager to hear your thoughts about whether these goals match with what you think are important areas of focus.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Clowder. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Mr. Palich.
Question, and first of all, thank you for the presentation and for the work. I'm interested in approaches that our educators are taking to consider equity as they actually do their classroom instruction and coursework. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the professional development session that's going to be happening, that Dr. Amante Jackson is going to be leading on that subject. And I know, obviously, the professional development piece we know is so critical to what happens in the classroom, but obviously for members of the community in particular, that's when the kids are not in school and there's so much happening there. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that program and some of the approaches that might be that are encouraged.
Sure, so we don't get another opportunity with Dr. Monte Jackson this year. We had that on August 31st, but we do get a sustained course on becoming a more equitable educator. That's a course that follows kind of from MIT's edX, which a MOOC course that was adapted, that DLT worked on. But the thrust of kind of our work thus far has been to kind of look at the role of identity in teaching and learning. And so one of the first exercises she really encouraged us to think about was our own cultures and the assumptions that stem from that. So for example, is it okay to talk about your feelings? What are your rules about eye contact? When you consider what a good student is, what are those things and how do you unpack them? And then how might barriers interrupt kind of your impressions of students based on, you know, like, do you think of a student that doesn't return their homework as a lazy kid? How can you engage more deeply to figure out what's behind a kid maybe not being able to be successful, and learn more and then think about, okay, well, how could I eliminate that barrier? So some of those first things were really encouraging staff to talk about their identity and to model that so that students felt like they could in turn share their identities with each other and with their teachers and foster better trusting relationships. She emphasizes trust repeatedly. But then part of it was really looking at, based on our own experiences in our own families and then our experiences of school, what are some assumptions and kind of powers that we either reward or punish students for based on those assumptions, and how could we change that framework? So if a student isn't able to do something, really sitting with the student and thinking what would be required in order to get that student more engaged. And when we have communication breakdowns, kind of what about that is about what's convenient for us versus the family really being disengaged, and remembering that no parent doesn't, you know, it is kind of, in the face of a student struggle, is kind of ambivalent about it, right? They might face significant barriers in communicating with school, but all parents really want positive outcomes for kids. So that's in a nutshell, kind of some of our areas of focus. I think the other piece she talked more systemically was about kind of, as we change traditions and approaches to things to represent more diverse cultures, we have to consider some loss goes with that. So if we make room for other voices, some favorite units or favorite things might have to go in order to have a bigger perspective. And so how do you set the stage for making some of those trade-offs? Because the academic day and the amount of time we have remains the same.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further comments, Ms. Heffernan?
Thank you. I really appreciate the report, and I appreciate having a framework in which to bucket some of the work, because it is iterative and it's also a lot and is definitely a long road. And appreciate not only you're mentioning, you know, that your staffing is more white and female, and our committee is white individuals of this community, right? And then when I look at even some of the data from Mr. Almeida earlier and the number of languages spoken in homes in Shrewsbury is a changing community in many ways. And so I'm really excited, I guess is maybe the right word, and sort of in this anticipatory excitement about sort of like all the things that we're doing, but also know that this stuff takes a lot of time, and that can be, for some watching, feel like it's too slow, but can appreciate from where you sit that those are a lot of balls you just mentioned, right? From data and parental engagement and hiring and curriculum reviews, and that I have no doubt that the town's task force, particularly the education subcommittee, when it is appropriate, that I sat on, there are many members of that who would be eager to ever have ongoing conversations about where, when, and how did those recommendations come about. But I am also really proud of the work that you're doing on behalf of the schools. And so I really want to just really thank you and the many people who stand with you who aren't here tonight.
They're here.
They're there. That this is not sort of a one person show, but really across the district, trying to engage a lot of people to move a lot of different levers, such that we make our spaces the welcoming places for kids and families, but also places where they really all can succeed, right? Like living out that mission, it's right there for us, but it is also like just beyond grasp, right? Because there's just so many things that we need to be doing. So thank you for keeping us focused.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Fritz?
Thank you, Amy. Every time you come before us, you always bring very well-reasoned information. Yeah, and it's just well thought out. And I think DEI work is it's a lot, and it's also something that has to be done very delicately and in a mindful approach to how is it going to affect the entire community. And I think I shared it with John. I was in a DEI meeting at work, and somebody made a comment that we have to think of this as a box of crayons. It just kind of like, includes every color, and I think when we do DEI work, that's what we have to make sure we're looking at all cultures. And how do we respect each other? How do we acknowledge the differences? And I think, moving forward with curriculum too, because like you said, there are some things that are going to probably have to go by the wayside to make room for these other things that are now more important for children to learn. So I think there's so much to do, but every time we talk about this, I think of that box of crayon comment somebody made when we were in a work meeting for it, but thank you. I think there's a lot to do, but it has to be done carefully and not rushed.
Yeah, and I think to the extent that we can integrate it into our work, that's better work. And so rather than thinking of it as something we're adding on, it's an opportunity to really blend several things at the same time. Because again, social emotional learning and diversity and equity work are linked. The result is that we want an inclusive school community.
Absolutely, thank you.
Great. Further comments? Well, thank you, Amy. Appreciate the report, and I really appreciate how the goals and next steps are laid out in this plan. I think from an HR perspective, I'd like to see how we're looking at various ways to improve recruiting. I know Barb Malone's done some great work, a lot of really important work in this space, but also from a professional development standpoint, infusing equity into professional development for our staff, I think is great. And then family engagement, you mentioned, I think that's really critical to the success of this area. It's certainly the feedback that we receive through surveys, I think, are very important to get all that family engagement, and the comments and just the feedback, I think, is important. I also appreciate the reference to continuing the educational programming around the Colonials mascot. I think there was a lot of value in the discussion that we had back in June, and it's really good to see that is also part of this plan. But I think the time-based goals by trimester, and you've got a lot of specific information here. I think the public would be well served to read through this because it's very, very well done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Clowder's report and all the work that everyone in the district's been undertaking around these critical topics. I think that it bears mentioning, of course, that one only needs to watch the news or read the newspaper to know that there are a variety of controversies in our nation, in our state, regarding this topic. Some of those, frankly, are manufactured, and some of them are very real. And it's important, I think, to bring this to the attention of the community this evening, and the work that we continue to do, that this is not just something that was something that we moved on from, but it is going to take a long time, and we need to do it thoughtfully. We need to do it pragmatically. We need to do it deliberately. And I'd say that both in terms of purpose as well as the speed with which we undertake it to be thoughtful. There is absolutely strength and diversity in our community. I think that our district continues to become a more and more vibrant place for children and for families, but we need to make sure that for a variety of reasons, because we are not immune as a community from the pernicious effects of racism, whether that's subtle or whether that's overt, and it's something that we have to continue to think about being proactive, as well as thinking of ways that we can support and respond when we come across areas that are troubling. So with that, again, I appreciate the ongoing work. It is, and I appreciate Ms. Heffernan's comments, because as you heard earlier from the students who presented from the Student Advisory Committee, what you've heard over the course of this fall, this has not been an easy year in any organization or sector, but obviously I'm speaking for our schools, and although I think there are lots of wonderful things happening, it is still a very challenging environment, just in terms of the amount of intense effort that it's taking to make things work. But even within that, I think it's really critically important to mention that we are not taking our eye off the ball when it comes to advancing this work, and it is something that is going to have to continue and happen over a considerable period of time. but at the same time, not be, have enough momentum that we're making progress. So again, appreciate the report and appreciate the support of the committee.
Great. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is under Finance and Operations. It is a vote on the fiscal year 2023 budget priorities and guidelines. At our meeting on October 20th, Mr. Collins presented a draft of the budget guidelines and priorities for the fiscal year 2023 for review by the committee in advance of a vote planned for tonight's meeting. The draft is enclosed. Ms. Heffernan and Dr. McGee are members of the Fiscal Projections Subcommittee, and Mr. Collins is here with us today and available for questions and any additional information that's needed. So with that, Mr. Collins, Dr. Sawyer, anything more to add?
I would just, for those that did not tune into the last meeting, I would just briefly say that the priorities and guidelines document is really, the beginning of the budget process for next fiscal year, and kind of sets the course for us and for the administration in terms of the priorities that the school committee wants us to focus on as an administrative team in terms of putting together a budget document to support the educational services and plans for the upcoming school year. The three basic priorities that are in front of you, I'll just read them out loud here. First is to meet the commitments as detailed in the March 16th, 2021 override statement to the residents of Shrewsbury and agreed upon between the Board of Selectmen and the school committee. That is relative to the successful override and the spending cap, if you will, for the upcoming years, succeeding years. Number two is coronavirus planning and resources. Of course, we want to make sure that we have safe school environments for all of our students and staff and the resources to do that. And then third and finally is resources for continued progress towards fulfillment of the 2018-2022 strategic priorities. And there's a series of things under that particular topic or heading as well. So those are the three main priorities. And then the assumptions, I won't read all those. There's 9 different assumptions here about what we're assuming to be kind of the environmental factors that we'll either consider or are presented to us and that we'll have to work within as we put together the fiscal 23 budget document. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what's in front of you this evening.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Any questions or comments, colleagues? Okay, very good. Dr. Sawyer, any final?
No, I think that the subcommittee and Mr. Collins put together a very thoughtful document, and I recommend that you support it.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, this requires a vote. So I need a motion that the committee vote to approve the fiscal year 2023 budget guidelines and priorities as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is also under Finance and Operations. It is regarding grant funding from the American Rescue Plan for homeless students. It does require a vote. As part of the American Rescue Plan, the federal government has dispersed targeted grant funds via each state to further support children who are homeless, and Shrewsbury is eligible for $5,118 of total statewide $6.75 million received by Massachusetts. Additional information was provided in a separate memo. It's recommended that the school committee vote to accept these funds. Here to provide additional context is Mr. Collins.
Sure, and I think you covered all the salient points. I would just simply add, a couple of local factors here, in that, first, the question might be, well, how many homeless students do we have? That can fluctuate. It's actually a fairly low incidence population for Shrewsbury, and as a result, we're only receiving just over $5,000. And that $5,000 can be used up through June of 2024. So our plan is to spread that out over the next few years. Our population this school year, since the beginning of the school year, in terms of homeless students, has varied with a high of 7, and we are currently at 0. And again, that fluctuates like that during the course of the year. Some of the students were put into that homeless condition through adverse economic impacts, loss of job, family breakup, combination of both, and/or families displaced by fire. So it can be any kind of number of different circumstances. So our plan is to, when those situations arise, rather than try to create some sort of programs that, for a population that kind of comes and goes, is to rather provide direct assistance to those families, primarily in the form of gift cards, which is allowable through this grant as part of, it's one of their suggestions, in fact, to provide the resources that those students might need so that they are educationally ready to learn when they come to school. So that is our plan for the use of the funds.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Mr. Collins? Okay. Dr. Sawyer, any other comments?
No, I think it's a thoughtful use of this limited amount of funding, and I support it and ask that you vote to approve.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, this requires a vote, and I need a motion that the committee vote to accept the $5,118 from the American Rescue Plan for Homeless Children and Youth Grant Fund Code 302 and use the funds as specified in the enclosed memo.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is under new business. It is a vote on the superintendent's goals. Each year, the superintendent of schools presents performance goals to the school committee as part of the evaluation process, consistent with the evaluation process mandated by the Department of Education and elementary and secondary education. A professional practice goal and a student learning goal are provided for the school committee's review and approval. Superintendent is also responsible for moving forward the district's overall strategic priorities and goals. The two goals are specified to the 2021-2022 school year and have been provided under separate cover. With that, Dr. Sawyer, you want to provide additional comments?
Sure. Just briefly will summarize, and again, responsibilities that I have in my role is to advance the district goals as they exist under the strategic priorities framework that you approved a few years back, as well as the overall vision captured by the Portrait of a Shrewsbury Graduate. Each year, I'm required to come up with two specific goals, one related to student learning, one related to professional practice. This year, I've proposed that the goal related to student learning is a broad one in the sense that I think is work that's important to be doing, and we have been doing, but specifically take steps to try to achieve a deeper understanding of the effects of the ongoing pandemic on the collective progress our students are making academically, as well as socially and emotionally, and that after taking steps such as making sure I'm finding ways to interact with students at different grade spans, whether that's through student groups, through informal visits, through working with focus groups, as well as interacting with staff at each of the grade spans. Again, we have a variety of groups that we can utilize for that, leadership groups, advisory groups, and so on. And then as well as parents, which we have very different vehicles for that as well, through school councils, PTO leaders, et cetera. Also taking a look at the data we have around the academic assessments that we've been providing. Ms. Clowder has been speaking to that, and of course there'll be reports coming up, whether that's the testing report you'll receive at your early December meeting, I believe, or ongoing work from the STAR assessments or other kinds of assessments we're doing, but also looking at whether it's survey instruments like the Panorama instrument that Ms. Clowder mentioned in her previous report, or other sources just relative to whether that's discipline reports or just trying to look at the whole picture and trying to synthesize this information, compare it to what we're seeing across Massachusetts, nationally. We know some of the challenges we're facing this year are not unique to Shrewsbury. At the same time, there could be local context that's important to note. And then finally, the idea is to report out on the findings that I have probably by late March, along with any recommendations, and I'm hoping this dovetails with both the budget process we'll be going through at that time, as well as an ongoing conversation that will lead to the more specific strategic planning we'll be doing next fall as we start to look at our next 5-year plan. So that would be the student learning goal. As far as the professional practice goal, it echoes a goal I actually brought a couple of years ago. That goal was about communication more broadly with the community, with the school committee, more outward-facing communication. One piece of important feedback from a recent internal staff survey that we did is that, and some subsequent conversations with the leadership team, like other organizations, especially ones our size, there's a lot of communication that happens. And I think we do a good job of communicating generally, but I think what's also happening is that there's so much of it and so much going on that sometimes the proverbial left hand and right hand are not necessarily knowing what's all coming down at the end user at the same time. In terms of demands that are being placed upon them, there could be things coming from a district level, a school-based level from a principal, a department-based level from a director, and someone who's a classroom teacher or specialist or a paraprofessional. And a lot of it comes in our organization through email. So are there some ways, and I know there's different tools that are out there, some of which don't necessarily have a great reputation, in terms of that might be happening in other sectors, but I think it behooves us to look at what makes sense, but come up with some protocols that help. There may be opportunities to use tools that we do have, so that people know what, when to expect certain kinds of information, what kind of timelines they're on. If they're not quite sure about something, they know there's a place they can go back and find the information. How can we be appropriately repetitive so people, don't, so balls aren't dropped, or, someone misses a single email and they miss a really important piece of information, which I know I've been guilty of certainly, but also not inundating people with information overload as well. So I think like any high-functioning organization, the stronger our internal communications are, and the more digestible, the better off our staff members will be and able to carry out what their expectations. So that is the professional practice goal that I have proposed this evening. You have the text in the document, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have before you take a vote whether to approve them.
Great, thank you so much. Colleagues, any questions or comments?
Just a comment to say that I appreciate the focus on communications and the SMART goal. I know that you referenced that it was an older goal, but I think that the last year and a half has really highlighted the value and absolute necessity of effective communication. So glad we're going to continue to think very critically about how that's handled.
I would agree. I think communication is so important, and even under normal circumstances, there were a lot of communication. So, and we know these aren't normal circumstances, so it does require just taking another look at it and streamlining processes. And I think it's a great idea. I'm very supportive of these goals. So, okay, this does require a committee vote, so I need a motion that the committee vote to approve the superintendent's goals for 2021-2022 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
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 And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The minutes from the school committee workshop held on October 12th and the school committee meeting held on October 20th were enclosed and reviewed. Any revisions or edits? There being none, they'll be accepted as written. Thank you very much. Okay, we do need to head into executive session tonight, and I need a motion that the school committee enter into executive session for the purposes of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose 7, open meeting law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 22F and G, for the purposes of reviewing, approving, and/or releasing executive session minutes. And B, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect of the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and chair so declares. Purpose 3, the Shrewsbury Education Association, Units A and or B, the Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association and or Cafeteria Workers Association, and C, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law 30A, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Purpose 2, where deliberation in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and return to open session only for the purpose of adjourning for the evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote is required. Ms. Fritz?
Aye.
Mr. Palich?
Aye.
Ms. Heffernan?
Aye.
Dr. McGee?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you and good night.
Happy birthday, Sandy.
Today's your birthday.